Hi guys, this is Alistair De Silva again from Prayas Academy, and we are going to see an example to do with timers this time. So we are in Factory IO again, and as we can see, there's a big tank in front of us, right? And in this tank, we actually can see that there's a valve on top over here, right? So we have something called as a fill valve on top, and we have something called as a discharge valve over here, right? So let's just see what happens if we just turn these on forcefully, right? So if we turn on the fill valve, we will see that water starts filling actually in this tank, right? And if we actually turn on this discharge valve, we'll see that water actually starts draining from this tank, right? So we see a little indicator over here. This doesn't actually get connected to our PLC, it's just for indication. And if we actually look at the control panel, we will see that there are three elements here, right? And if you notice, there is actually two names here, right? Filling and fill. So this seems a little bit confusing, but if you actually hover over here, you will see that this filling is actually an output. Okay, so what does this output actually do? So if we actually look to see what it does, it actually is just an indicator for the button, right? So it's just going to indicate when we turn on this, and then we have a fill input, we have a discharge, and we have a discharge input as well. And if we notice, this discharge input is an NC push button. Can you see the difference? This is an NO push button, this is an NC push button. We also have a timer over here. Now we are not going to use this in our application, but we can actually display the time over here if required. Okay. So how do we actually program this application? So this application is very simple. We will need to actually fill to a particular level, right? And we are going to be using timers in this particular example, right? So this is a slightly longer logic than the previous two examples which we have seen, and definitely we are going to be writing a little bit more code than usual. Now, before we start, we have to know how many elements we are actually programming. So if we actually see here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. We have 6 elements here. And I have actually assigned these as follows. So I have my fill input, right, which is my push button, right? This green color push button over here. That is on my M0. My discharge red color push button is on my M1. And if you remember, this was an NC push button. Now we have Y0, Y1, Y2 and Y3, and this is going to be my fill valve. This is going to be my actual valve at the top here. Then we have filling, which is my indicator, which is this green indicator here. Then we have the discharge valve and we have discharging, right? So we are actually going to program this now, right? We're going to program this, and let's just open my editor on the right side. So in my PLC editor, first of all, we have this push button, which is an M0. So I'm going to introduce a push button here. Okay, so we'll name this as my fill, right? This is my fill button. And using my fill button, I actually have to start this fill valve, right? I need to start this fill valve, and I also need to turn on this filling indicator here, right? This filling indicator. So if you actually look at the input output list, we'll see that the fill valve and the filling is Y0 and Y1, right? So I'm going to set my Y0, and I'm also going to set my Y1, right? So I've set both these outputs, and I'm going to go to the next line now. Now I have to start a timer, right? I need to start a timer, and let's assume that we are going to fill this tank for around 20 seconds, right? So to start a timer, I actually need a contact over here. So I'm going to use this Y0, which I've turned on, right? So that I can engage the timer. So this is going to be on, right? We know because it's going to set over here once we press this fill button. And when this is on, this is actually going to start the timer. Right? So we are going to start a timer of 20 seconds. Now, why is this 20 seconds? In Delta, this T0 has a time base of 100 milliseconds. So 200 into 100 milliseconds is 20,000 milliseconds, and that is equal to 1000 milliseconds, right? So once this timer is done, right? Once this timer is done, we need to actually reset these outputs over here, right? So let's just create another line over here, and we know the timer is done when this T0 is actually going to turn on, right? And we can reset both these outputs over here, right? So I'm resetting both these outputs, and what I'm going to do, guys, I'm just going to test this logic, right? So that we know that it's working, and then we'll go for the discharge logic. So I'm going to download this to the PLC right now, and it is downloading. Okay, and if I actually go now to my control panel and I press this button right here, it should start, right? So starting this, and we can see that the fill valve has started and it has started to fill, and we can see that our timer is running as well, right? So our timer is going to run up to 20 seconds, right? So we're just going to wait for it to finish, and as soon as this timer is finished, it should reset both these outputs here. Okay, so it is done. I just noticed that this naming is wrong, right? This is from the previous example, obviously. So I'm going to change this to fill valve, and I'm going to change this to filling LED indicator. Okay, so I'm just going to name it as filling LED indicator and the fill valve. Sorry about that. That was a mistake on my end. So now that we are done with this, right, we now need to go for the discharge logic, right? So the discharge logic is actually going to be very similar to the above logic, right? It's actually just a copy paste of the above logic, and the only difference is that the discharge button is actually just NC, right? So we are going to create an NC. Now why is this NC, right? That is the important question. So I'm going to name this as discharge. Now, since this is an NC push button, if this was NC, what would happen is that this would get fired immediately without me pressing it, right? So that's a problem for me. I need this button to be NO, right? So this is why I have changed it to an inverted contact here. I want this to behave like an NO push button. Now I'm going to set Y2, and I'm going to set Y3 as well, right? And this is going to be my discharge valve. This is going to be my discharge valve, and this is going to be my discharging LED indicator, right? So we have our discharge logic over here. Now, just as above, we need to actually fire a timer, right? So we are going to use the Y3 this time, or the Y2, whichever. So let's use Y2, and we're going to run a timer. Now remember, I cannot use this T0 again, right? It's already been used. So I'm going to write a timer of T1, and you will see that although I am discharging for 20 seconds, this is probably not going to be enough, right? It's probably not going to be enough. There's still going to be a little bit water remaining, but we'll see that later. And once we are done with this, once the timer has reached, we'll actually have to reset both these this logic over here. So I'm going to just use a shortcut. I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to paste it over here, and I'm just going to change this to reset, right? And I'm going to change this to T1, and I'm going to change this to a normal contact, right? So us engineers love to copy paste, and I guess this is an easier way to do it, right? So you can copy paste rungs, you can copy paste logic whenever you need to. Okay, so we have this done here. Let us just download this to the PLC, and we are going to see how this is going to run. Now, if you notice, we already have some water here, so I'm just going to go ahead and discharge now. I'm going to click this discharge, and we can see that the discharge logic is now running, right? So the discharge logic is actually going to run for a whole 20 seconds. So let's just look at the water level now. Seems to be going down. Yeah, and like I said, it seems that the discharge valve does not have the same capacity as the filling valve, right? So we still have a little bit water here, but that's not a problem. We can go ahead and again click the discharge, and this is going to drain actually all the water. that's done. Now obviously if we know that the discharge requires more time, we'll have to increase this timing as well, right? But this is just to give you an idea of the logic you can use to run a basic filling example right here. I hope you enjoyed learning about this.